Hey everybody, it's Rory from A&S Gear, and today we're going to learn how to do some general maintenance on your paintball markers. All right, so we are looking at the Fusion Elite today. We're going to just go over this gun, do some general breakdowns for general maintenance, things that you should be looking at, things that you should be servicing. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take off the grips because it's always easier to work with a gun with no grips on it. Let's just get rid of those right away. I'm going to take off both sides just because that's what I like. All right. So we'll set that over here. Next, I'm going to see if I can just pop the reg off. We'll set that to the side because we're going to break that down a little bit later. Right there. Let's go ahead and unplug our board here. So this is our board assembly. We've got our solenoid wire as well as our eye wires. So those two, we're going to pop those two out of there. And that will allow us to separate the body from the frame. So let's go ahead and do that next. The wrong size. That one there. There. Now when we separate this, we're going to be extra careful when the wiring is coming out that we don't pull on it or yank or anything like that. We want to gently just feed everything around and kind of just push it and move it until it finds its path out of there. If we pull, there's a good chance we could ruin something. We definitely don't want to do that. There we go. All right, so we've got this and this. Now for this part of the gun, maintenance on it is really pretty straightforward. You're just going to wipe it down and clean it. If you find a paint has gotten up into your trigger assembly, you're just going to remove your trigger out, clean it all up as best you can, and that's really it. There's not much going on up in this part of the frame. Now down here you've got a couple things you want to look at. So let's pull out the ASA. We're going to pull the ASA off the gun. So there's one screw that's down in there. It's a rather large screw that's going to mount the ASA to the frame. I'm going to undo that one. You can see that coming up out of there. That's going to separate it. So if you've got a leak that is coming from in between here, in between your frame and your ASA, then it could be this gasket that's at the bottom right here. So you'd want to replace that one if that's the leak you're getting. That might not be the leak you're getting. You could be getting a leak that is coming from the bottom, like bleed hole that's down here or here. If you're getting a leak from this hole in the back right here, that is because your tank O-ring has gone bad. So the O-ring that goes in here that on your tank when you screw it in, that one has gone bad if you've got a leak from this hole. Now if you have a leak from this front hole right there, it's because the O-ring on your plunger has gone bad. And to remove that, take this off. I recommend you do this with the latch up like that. That way there's less spring tension and it won't want to shoot out as far. This O-ring right here most likely has gone bad and you'll need to replace that O-ring right there if you get a leak from the front. Now there is a spring that's up in here. Make sure you don't lose that spring. These two pieces just go together like that. They drop inside when you keep them together. And then you'll take the arm, put the arm on. I push it down. I'm pushing it into place so that the hole lines up inside there. And then drop the screw through the hole. and tighten it down. That's it. That's frame maintenance right there. Pretty straightforward. Not a lot going on in there. One other thing that could happen is right here you've got the transfer of air. So when you put your tank on here, air is going to go through the bottom, up through the frame, and it's going to come out of this gasket or this hole right here. And this hole has a gasket around it, an O-ring around it. That is going to match up with this little spot right here, this little turret, this piece. See it right there? It goes inside of that hole. So if you have a leak coming from the side of the frame, like right here, check to make sure that that seal, this gasket right here, is still okay. Now it could be other things that are leaking there too. The solenoid could be leaking, which can seem like the same thing, but that's an easy thing to look at and replace. So I would start there, because you never know. All right, let's move on. Put you over there. Let's go ahead and take the bolt out. There's no O-rings or anything on the bolt, so just wipe it up, keep it clean. Let's take our cap off the back. Let's see if you are right. There we go. All right, so we got that. There is an O-ring that's on the back here that seals the back of the cap. So if you, I've never seen them leak out the back, but if you get a leak coming out of here, change that O-ring that's on the back right there. Now let's get our ram out. Our ram. Now this can have all sorts of issues here. The thing is that this is an open area, like paint, dirt, and stuff can get down in here. And that is the same with a lot of the guns that are built like this or designed like this stack tube poppet design. Dirt is just possible to get down in there. So these O-rings right here, this front one here, this one right here in the middle, these are the two main O-rings that you're dealing with. These are your sealing O-rings that cause the rammer to move back and forth. This one is just a bumper, and this one is just a bumper as well. So they don't hold air. They just, when the bolt is or the rammer is shuttling back and forth, they're used as a bumper. So when it, slams up against something, it's not metal on metal. So if you have firing issues, leaking issues through the back of the gun back here, replace these two O-rings right there and see if that solves your problem. All right. So that eliminates the back half of the gun right here. Let's open up the eye covers. Get them out of the way. This is your detent. If you have a lot of chopping issues or double feeding issues, go ahead and take a look at your detents. Let me slide those back a little bit so you can see them, to make sure that they are not broken or nicked or chopped, and that they're still doing their job and holding one paintball in the breech at a time. Take the other side off as well. And the other detent out. There we go. Those are very important to proper cycling and ball management right there. If your detents are no good, you can have all sorts of problems. Secondly, since we've got the eye covers off, this has a lot to do with maintenance as far as cleaning. Your eye wires are so important, your sensor and your wire, that you keep them clean, and especially keep the hole clean that the sensor sits in. So the hole right there where that sensor is going to look through needs to be clean and free of debris. We see people come in all the time, they pop their eye out and they clean it, they wipe it off, and then they just stick it right back on there. Well, this hole is just jammed full of crap inside there, and it still doesn't work, and they think their eyes are bad and they want to buy new ones, when all they just need to do is clean properly so that that eye can see through that hole to the other side, and their problems would be eliminated. So very important, if you're breaking paint or have broke paint, that you clean that eye hole out. Otherwise, you'll run into more problems. All right, so the eye wire is usually bundled together with the solenoid wire. So to get it just out of the way, I'm going to remove the solenoid out of here. You can see they've zip tied it together. You can pop those things off of there, it doesn't matter. They don't need to be attached, but just to get it out of the way, We're going to do that, and then we're going to lift this thing right out. Now on the bottom of our solenoid, we've got some O-rings. I don't want to lose these screws, so I'm going to make sure they stay in there. You've got this gasket right here. So if you have a leak from the bottom of your solenoid, it could be coming out of that gasket. It also could be coming from the spool of the solenoid itself, which would be removed with this right here. Now there's a good chance that I won't be able to open this up by hand up here right now, but we're going to try. We're going to see what happens. Sometimes I need to set this in a vise so that I can get the right amount of pressure on it. Oh, we got it. So inside here is your spool, your solenoid spool. This is what directs airflow inside the solenoid itself, and it is possible for this to go bad. So we've got a little spring that's inside there. Or not, I don't want to say go bad, but to leak. Let me just take both these out and we'll set them right here. Now getting this out, you sometimes will need a little needle nose plier, which I don't have with me, but you can see it down in there. You grab a hold of that little nub right there with some needle nose, and then go ahead and slide the spool out, and there's O-rings on the spool which you would need to change. And I don't think I'm going to be able to pick that out. Let me give it a little whirl here and see if I can get it. Yeah, not going to happen. Even through the tiny holes, I'm not going to get it. So anyway, if your solenoid was leaking, right in there, grab a hold of that thing and then pop it out. Let's put our spring back in. I'm not going to keep these parts just laying around. I don't want to lose any of them while I've got it open. All right, keep that tight. Put our screws back through, and then we'll set it to the side. All right, moving on. So we've got everything off the gun except for the valve assembly, which is inside, and our LPR, which is sitting right here. So let's pull that off. It is one size up. Right there. Pop that out of there. Now you don't want to lose this. This ring is important. It needs to sit on top of here. This is what's going to push against the spring for your poppet. So that's going to sit right along there. So you can see this little cap fits right on there, just like that. And that'll keep this spring from grinding into the face right here, like that. Over time, that'll just keep grinding and grinding, and it'll slip off of there. So it's important that this is on here, like this, and like that. It'll keep that spring in the proper spot and keep it from destroying or ruining anything that's on here. Okay. Let's pull this out. This is our valve retainer. This is going to go up into the valve and keep it from moving and sliding out. Let's see if I can get this out of there. I don't know if I have what I need. Let's just see here. Oh yeah. There we go. So that takes that out. Use the pen, and you can see there's nothing left inside of there anymore. So I've removed all the parts out of the body. So this is our valve right here. So this goes through here. This comes up through the bottom and holds this in place like that. And then when our ram comes forward, it strikes this and opens it up. You can see if I can hold it without it moving, it's going to open up like that. And that's what allows your air to come through. Your air is all filled up on this side over here. When the ram comes forward and strikes the poppet, pops it open. When it's in the open position like that, air is able to come through the inside of the valve, up through the top of the valve. And when it does that, your bolt is sitting right above it. So this hole right here where the air is going to come out runs through a chamber in the body, a passage, and then the bolt sits right above it like this. So the air comes up through into your bolt, then through the holes in the bolt and out the end of the gun. Then this comes back, this spring pushes this closed and it seals, and no more air comes up through the top. Pretty fancy, huh? Fancy pants. All right. Let's take this part. All right, so we're going to get into this is the LPR, so our low pressure regulator. And remove the set screws from the outside. It's going to allow us to take that out. So inside here is our reg seat. It's attached all in one piece to our adjuster. But if your reg ever seems to spike or not control airflow properly, you've got shoot down, all sorts of weird things, it's typically because the seat inside there could be damaged. Now that is going to come into more of effect on our high pressure regulator than on our low pressure regulator. But if you're not getting the proper pressure into your ram to move it back and forth, or it's over pressurizing in there and bleeding out of your solenoid, then check your LPR reg seat right there. Let's open this up. There's our pin and spring inside here. So this is our piston right here. The piston comes through the housing and sticks out the end, and it seals against the reg seat down at the bottom. So this goes and it seals down there, and that's what cuts off your airflow. So there's a couple O-rings in here you want to be aware of. The O-ring that's actually on the piston itself, right there, that blue one. Plus there is another one, which is inside here. It's right on the lip, but on the inside, and you would definitely need a pick to get it out. And that is what seals around the piston itself right there. So it seals around the outside of the stem, not allowing air to flow through that way. So it seals in there. This is actually coming in from the other side, but the O-ring inside here seals around here. So those are the ones you want to look at. That O-ring, this inside O-ring, and the reg seat down in there are very, very important. Let's put you back together. There. Woo! There. We're going to put this back together. That one and this one. All right. And then service these outside O-rings if you're getting an outside leak. Typically, these just need to be greased and put back in. Seeing as though these don't move, they're not They're a static O-ring. They're not a dynamic O-ring. They're just sealing, so they don't have a lot of wear to them. So you probably won't ever need to replace those, but you could. Eventually you could. All right, so let's get to the reg here. Adjustment is through the bottom. We're going to hopefully be able to get this thing apart without going downstairs and using the vise. But let's just see what happens here. So you've got a couple O-rings at the top that you want to make sure that are good. This one here seals the regulator itself to the body right here. And then these O-rings at the top are going to go up inside and seal internally so that we've got proper air passage. Seeing as though you don't have a macro line on this gun when it's set up on here, the air coming up through the bottom of the frame, going into the gun, gets diverted forward and into the regulator. Now, some of the regulated air is going to go up and be held behind the valve so that it has enough pressure to shoot the ball out of the gun or push the ball out of the gun. But some of that air is also going to be redirected into the LPR and be pushed back to the solenoid so that it can move the ram back and forth inside of there. So these O-rings, these diverting O-rings, I'm going to call them, keeping the air going into certain passageways, are very important that you maintain and keep them greased, as well as just monitored. Now, as I unscrew this, we've got another O-ring here that's going to seal the top to the bottom. Make sure that those stay good. Here's our piston. Remember, we saw a piston very similar to this, just on a much smaller size inside of here. So you've got an O-ring to watch right there, which is going to sit up inside here. And then we do have another small O-ring that is going to be on the inside of this blue piece in here, which we're going to pop out. So this blue piece right here holds our other O-ring that this goes through and is inside there. So that O-ring is actually right underneath there, inside, right in there, and it seals again around the outside of that. So a very important O-ring if you are doing regulator maintenance. And then we see down at the bottom, again, we have a reg seat down in there. Let me pull this one out so you guys get an idea of what that piece actually looks like. Just want to look at this so that I have the proper placement when I put it back together. I kind of know how far it needs to go in. All right, so here's our regulator adjuster. It's got one O-ring at the bottom that seals it from leaking out of here. So if you get a leak that comes right out the bottom of your regulator, it's because of this O-ring right here. If again you have overcharging, low velocity issues or shoot down issues, it could be because of the reg seat right here. Could also be because of the piston O-ring on the inside there or at the top. So those are all things you want to change out. Now on dangerous power guns, you cannot just remove the seat out of this and replace it with another seat. You do need to replace the entire piece. Let's put that back in. Push it down. I'm pushing on it with my finger so that it grabs when I thread it back down here. I'm going to look and kind of put it back roughly where it was, right about there. I'm going to take this little piece. I'm going to just drop inside there. Then I'm going to thread it back down in, tighten that up. Take my piston and my spring. Very important that you don't lose the spring, and don't forget about that. It does need to be there, and it does not go on top of it like this. It goes around the piston, in like that, and then threads in. Just like that, and then that will thread back onto the body when it's time to put that back together. So that's it right there. So now I'm just going to go through and put it back together. Since we've got it to this point, we should be able to easily just reassemble everything. If you know where everything goes, you can just watch everything in reverse and we'll know for sure. But we'll put it back together. One thing, when we start with the valve and put it in, so if we look at the valve has a hole on one side where you can actually see the piston or the poppet inside there. The other side does not have a hole that goes all the way through. The hole that does not go all the way through is where our retainer pin is going to go up and meet up with that. So we need to make sure that the non-hole side is on the bottom, so that when we put this in and we put this in, they line up with each other. So we're going to push this in. I've lined up, I know where my non-hole side is. Hole side, non-hole side. I'm going to push that through and look for it in the top. Now I can see that it's there. As you push these in, they will always rotate and move. I've never seen them line up perfect. So now I can see a little bit of it. It's gonna be hard for you guys to see through this hole, but down there's a little edge of it at the bottom. So on this side, I can see a little edge of that hole in there. I'm gonna take my pick, I'm gonna rotate it so that now the hole is perfectly lined up with the outside. I'm gonna put this in, and I'm gonna screw this down in there. There we go. So now our valve is properly in there. We can take our poppet and spring and push it down in there. What I do with this is I take this little seat ring, whatever they want to call it, and I put it in right away, just on top of the spring, so that I know it's lined up properly on there, like that. And then I just take the LPR and I'm going to thread it in. If you try to put that little that spring washer on the LPR and then tip it to go in there, it'll probably just fall off and not be in the right spot. So doing it this way means you know you've set it in the right spot. We'll take our ram, put that in there as well, and then we'll tighten that up. Okay. Now, well, actually, you know what? One thing I didn't talk to you guys about, which I probably should, is bolt pin to ram alignment. Now, this carries over into many different guns. G6Rs, LV1s, Egos, anything with this stacked tube design. So I'm going to take this back out again real quick, just so you guys have a better idea of the ramifications of not locking the rammer in properly. Nose is running. All right, so this sits inside your gun, down at the bottom, and moves back and forth at a very high speed to make things happen inside there. Your bolt links together with it, like this. So that when this moves along with it, like that. It moves this way. Okay. Now, this has no idea if this is properly locked into it, like this. So there can be all sorts of problems occurring or happening if you do not do this properly. For instance, if we were to, for some reason, put this into our gun, so it's sitting inside our gun like this, and then we slid our bolt in, and we dropped this down like this. All right, and then you shot your gun. What is going to happen is the ram is going to slam forward and drive the bolt forward like this, and the bolt pin, this part, the metal part of the pin, is going to smash into the metal that is right here on the top and down inside on that first little cutout down in there. And if you keep pulling the trigger, it is going to keep doing it over and over and over again, to the point where you do one of two things. You either bend this the front part of the ram will actually bend because it is hammering against a piece of metal that is not completely over the front of it. It's only covering part of it. So it's possible to bend it to the side, and then it will not come out, and it will not slide inside of there. Or what normally happens is this post smashes into the body starts to mushroom and spread because it's being just destroyed, and then the bolt doesn't want to come out anymore because you've reshaped the body, and now it scratches up the bolt, and you have all sorts of problems. If you look at your bolt and you see scratching along the top or scratching along the bottom, you've probably already done that, and now you've caused that wear to appear on the bolt. Otherwise, you really shouldn't have too much wear on there. So it is super important that when you put your ram in and you put your bolt and lock it into place, that you lock these two things together. Probably the most important thing in the entire gun for keeping it in a working fashion. So let's slide that back in, put that back on, tighten that up, and now we can look down inside there and we can see where our ram is sitting. We can see that right now that right there is the slot where the bolt needs to lock in. You could pull this back if you wanted to, and now our slot is right down there. Come in from this side. It's right there where it wants to lock in. So any way you want to do it is up to you. I have typically in the past, I keep it all the way back like that, and then I line up a spot on the side of the gun where I know that's right above where the pin is. Then I slide it in and I lock it into place. Now to check, I can push forward, and you see how it pushes back? That's because I'm pushing the ram into the valve that we built a second ago, and the spring is pushing it backwards and pushing it back. Now if I do this wrong and I lock it in front, you see the difference right there? There's no pushback on there. So I can still move this back and forth, but right now I've put the pin in front of the ram. So if I shot the gun right now, the ram would smash the pin into the body and cause all sorts of problems. So I'm going to pull that back out, look for the spot, drop it down in, and then check. Make sure I get that spring on there. Now I know I've lined up properly, and I'm good to move on. Next, I'm going to reinstall our solenoid. Put that on there. Screw these down. Give them a little bit of a snug. I'm going to flip this on its side. Push my eye wire into their holding spot. Put my detent in. And then put my eye cover on. Make sure that the bump in your eye cover, which is here, that fits into this little grooved spot right here, does not smash your eye wire. Otherwise, your eyes won't work. Flip it over. Push our eye in. Detent. Eye cover. And tight. All right, next, put our frame back on. I'm going to kind of bend these wires out a little bit so that they want to kind of stay straight. That way it's going to be easier for me to feed them through here. I might need to kind of pick at them and get them to come up through individually. These ones can be a little bit of a booger sometimes. Sometimes you got to do one, get one of them up here, and then, oh, the other one decided to go the wrong way. Let's see if I can push him back through here. Remember, don't ever force it. If it doesn't seem to want to do it, just reset it and do it again. There we go. If you don't have some picks, get some. They are a necessity when it comes to doing gun work or gun maintenance. You must have a set of picks. I'm gonna take our screws, put them back in here. Do a little tighten, Plug our wiring back in. Screw our regulator on. And then put our grips back on. Then after this, you should be good to go. Whatever problem you were fixing or just preventative maintenance you were doing should be taken care of. You want to go out there and test your gun first. I would never, after doing this, just walk on the field and assume that it was good. You'll want to gas it up, get some paint, shoot it over the chronograph, see where you are, adjust your regulator, adjust your LPR, whatever you need to do to set the gun up to be functioning properly before you walk out on the field. This is not something you should be doing at the field on your bench. You should be doing this at home in an area where things won't get lost and where you can easily track down parts that tend to want to roll away. So that's it. This is our Fusion Elite. See you next time.